Good evening and welcome to the 776 Summer Street Deconstruction Informational Meeting. My name is April Anderson and I will be your moderator for this evening. On behalf of HRP and Redgate, I thank you for joining us here tonight. We're excited to have you all here to meet our team, hear about our plans and schedule for deconstruction, and to get your questions answered. We have up to 2 hours allotted for this meeting, and we expect our presentation will take approximately 1 hour. The second half of our session will be dedicated to community Q&A. If you joined us for the first deconstruction informational meeting in September, you will notice that the information shared here tonight is substantially similar with some updates. You will notice that we are using the webinar format for this evening's presentation, just as we did in September. This means that the only people you will see on your screen are the presenters and your elected officials. We are expecting a lot of participants tonight, and we want to be sure that we are using your time as efficiently as possible and answering as many questions as we possibly can here live tonight. The Zoom format allows us to do that. While you won't see yourself on the screen, we really encourage you to participate in this virtual meeting. We've tried to make that as easy and efficient as possible. Just to submit a question, just click the Q&A function that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. That will open a text box where you can type in your question and send it directly to the panelists. If you are joining us by phone, you can send questions via email to hrpinfo+boston@hillcoglobal.com, and we will do our best to monitor that email throughout the evening. George, if you could advance to the next slide, please. Maybe the next slide. Just hoping to get that email address up on the screen. There we go. You can feel free to submit questions at any time during this meeting, so don't feel as though you have to wait until the presentation is over and the Q&A begins. We will answer all of the questions in the sequence that they are submitted. And as I said previously, we'll do our best to answer as many questions live here tonight as we can. So if there are questions that we do not get to, we will answer them in writing on our website. And in fact, a transcript of all of the questions that were asked in September are already online with answers, and we will be posting the same from this meeting here tonight as well. We recorded this meeting tonight, which will also be posted on our website. So if anyone you know missed it, they're happy to, we can have them come take a look at the recording and the transcript. And all of this information will be available online and added to what's already there in the next couple of weeks. Our goal here is to provide a comprehensive update as we move toward the deconstruction phase of our project, to answer all of your questions and to provide transparency in our public engagement, not only tonight, but moving forward through the remainder of our project. Now with that, I will turn it over to Melissa Schrock of HRP, who will kick off the presentation.
Thanks, April, and thanks to everybody who's dialing in this evening. My name is Melissa Schrock, and I'm SVP of Mixed Use Development at HRP. I'm joined this evening by many of my colleagues, our partners at Redgate, our contractors and consultants, and the community independent environmental consultants, many of whom you will meet here tonight. As April said, we held our first informational public meeting on the deconstruction phase last month. For those who attended that meeting, we will be reviewing much of the same content with some important updates that we want to share with you. We understand that the neighborhood has a lot of interest and questions on how this work will be done and the safety mechanisms that will be in place. After all, the facility is located in your backyards. Therefore, we thought it was appropriate to begin communicating with our neighbors well in advance of actually starting deconstruction. We also know many people are busy and some may not have been able to dial in last month who are calling in tonight. So for those of you who did join last month's call, we ask for your patience as we go through the materials again, but you will hear some important updates along the way, and we'll do our best to call those out. HRP and Redgate remain committed to transparent community communication so that the neighborhood knows what to expect and when to expect it as we move forward. You're probably wondering what exactly I mean when I say deconstruction. I'm referring to the phase we are beginning soon, which entails the abatement of all of the structures on the site, meaning the removal of any regulated materials that are present and the demolition of all of the structures, except of course the 4 turbine halls that we will be preserving. We call the totality of this phase deconstruction in order to communicate the careful approach we'll be taking to abating and dismantling components of the facility. We anticipate starting deconstruction later this fall, likely in November, pending receipt of some final permits. As some of you may have noticed, there is some preparatory work going on now, such as cutting and capping utility lines that run into the site, connecting temporary power, erecting fences, and other activities to make the site safe for deconstruction to begin. Next slide, please, George. So for our agenda tonight, we will introduce you to key ownership team members, meaning our contractors and the owner's abatement oversight team, as well as to the community independent environmental reviewer. We will then review the deconstruction means and methods, review mitigation measures, and provide our plan for ongoing community communications and give you information on how to contact us, as well as information on work opportunities at the project. Next slide, please. First, a little bit about us. L Street will be actually the 4th coal-fired power plant that HRP has deconstructed. We've also deconstructed other complicated sites across the country, like the former Bethlehem Steel Mill on 3,100 acres outside of Baltimore, and we are actively decommissioning and deconstructing a 1,300-acre oil refinery inside the city limits of Philadelphia. Part of what makes us unique in the commercial real estate industry is our expertise with these kinds of former industrial sites. As we undertake the deconstruction work at 776 Summer, our #1 focus is protecting human health and safety and protecting the environment. Safety, safety, safety is our motto, and you'll hear a lot about that tonight and some of what we call the belts and suspenders approaches that we take to ensuring it. There's something I want to address. As some of you may know, we had an incident on a project in Chicago last year where a controlled implosion of a smokestack, which had been fully permitted by the local authorities, unfortunately resulted in dust migrating off of the site. After the controlled implosion, HRP took full responsibility, removed the responsible contractor, and cooperated fully with city, state, and environmental authorities. That smokestack had been abated prior to its implosion, and subsequent independent testing by the city revealed that the dust posed little health risk to residents. Regardless, this was a very unfortunate incident and something HRP never wants to see happen again. So I want to assure everyone that we will not be using any explosion or implosion techniques at 776 Summer Street. We will be using only what are called mechanical dismantling methods. The subcontractor who took over the Chicago site after the implosion and completed the work safely was the Chicago office of Northstar, who you will meet here tonight. You will meet their Boston team here tonight. Now I want to introduce you to our overall team. Our general contractor, Suffolk, needs little to no introduction as one of the region's and in fact the nation's preeminent general contractors. We have engaged them here for the deconstruction phase to manage all of the subcontractors, including Northstar. They have responsibility for overall site safety, including perimeter pedestrian safety, truck access, sequencing, and schedule. And as we'll talk about later, Suffolk is also hosting a deconstruction website that's already up and running. They'll host that throughout the project and provide a hotline for neighbors to call with any concerns. On the deconstruction subcontractor, Suffolk ran a thorough selection process with 5 qualified bidders for the deconstruction work. And after several months of detailed review and interviews, we selected Northstar. I'm going to let David Pearson from Northstar provide more details, but Northstar is a national firm headquartered in New York State with a local office in Everett, Mass, which was established in 1988. They have local and national experience specializing in complicated and contaminated sites such as power plants, including the Brayton Point Power Plant in Somerset, Mass, and the Vermont Nuclear Power Plant. They also have experience working in tight urban areas and next to residential neighborhoods, which require, of course, the utmost precaution. They are currently working at 1 PO Square, which I'm sure many of you have seen, and they're also working on the demolition of a 30-story residential project in Cambridge. They have 150 local employees, and they are signatory to local unions 4 and 223. They'll be rounding out their in-house team with local union workers, and a few select experts in specific scope, such as high burning, will be brought in as needed. They'll go into more detail on the means and methods with Suffolk, but to be clear, all structures will be fully remediated before being carefully dismantled. Northstar is prohibited from using any explosives or any methods that involve so-called dropping, felling, or tipping of large elements. We also have an owner's abatement oversight consultant team. That begins with TRC, our owner's consultant who oversees the abatement work. In order to define and quantify the asbestos and other regulated materials in the structures, we engaged TRC to do a comprehensive survey earlier this year, which was provided to Suffolk and Northstar. An asbestos report was also submitted to DEP for their review. A formal asbestos abatement plan is also being prepared by Northstar and will be submitted to DEP for their review and approval before work can commence. TRC will also provide abatement oversight on the site of the subcontractor's work, meaning of Northstar's work. They will have an industrial hygienist inspector team on site and will conduct daily air monitoring outside the abatement containment areas. Additionally, Sanborn Head is a member of our ownership team. Sanborn Head is our owner's licensed site professional, or LSP. In a moment, my colleague Juliana will talk more about their role on the project, but during the deconstruction phase, they will be providing perimeter dust monitoring and vibration monitoring throughout the phase. This is a little bit of a belts and suspenders approach, as I mentioned earlier, to protect human health and safety, both on and off site, to the greatest extent possible. Now, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Juliana Connolly, who will discuss the role of the community independent environmental reviewer. But before I do, just a reminder for folks, or for anybody who may have joined a few minutes late, please don't hesitate to enter any of the questions that you may have in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen as we go through the presentation. We will be answering them afterward. Thank you. Juliana?
Thanks, Melissa. Good evening, everyone. My name is Juliana Connolly, and I lead environmental remediation work for HRP. I want to take just a few minutes to introduce everyone first to the concept of the community independent environmental reviewer that we have as part of this project, and then we'll specifically introduce you to who those people are. So the company that is serving in this role as the independent environmental reviewer is GZA, Geo-Environmental, and I'll introduce you to them in a moment. But first, I just want to talk through the background of how we got to this role. During our initial entitlement public meetings that we had for the project, we committed to engaging a licensed site professional, or an LSP, to review environmental reports and to answer questions from members of the community. This is a concept that came up during one of those earlier public meetings, and we thought it was a great idea, and we were happy to follow through on that suggestion. LSPs are individuals who are licensed by the state of Massachusetts. So again, LSP stands for Licensed Site Professional. I happen to be an LSP here in Massachusetts. I'm going to introduce you to 3 LSPs today, including myself. But so the role of LSPs in Massachusetts is that we're responsible for ensuring that cleanup of soil and groundwater is conducted appropriately in accordance with Massachusetts regulations. Specifically, the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, or the MCP, is an acronym that you might hear. So that's the role of an LSP, and there will be work conducted at this site under the oversight of an LSP. As Melissa mentioned on the last slide, specifically Sanborn Head Associates is the environmental consulting firm that will work directly for HRP to provide that licensed site professional oversight. And specifically, Tricia Pinto at Sanborn Head Associates will be our LSP of record. So Tricia will serve in that role for this project, and then I am also an LSP. So we're going to have a lot of LSP eyes on the work that's going on here. The idea of the independent environmental reviewer was that there would be someone who wasn't part of ownership, like myself, or working directly for ownership, who did have this expertise and could be available to members of the community to answer questions. And that's where we brought GZA in to fill that role. Of course, at any time, members of the community should feel comfortable. If you have a question for ownership, for me as LSP at the ownership, or for our LSP, Tricia Pinto, we're happy to answer questions as well. And then GZA is available as an independent option to answer questions if people have those. I just want to talk through how we identified GZA as the right group to fill this role. As we were thinking about identifying an independent LSP, we first thought it might be helpful to expand that role outside of simply an LSP, because we have a lot of work going on here during this deconstruction phase that isn't quite in the wheelhouse of an LSP necessarily. So the deconstruction work, the asbestos abatement, the hazardous materials removal from inside the buildings, that's not specifically related to an LSP's oversight. So we thought we would expand this role of the environmental reviewer to include both an LSP and other individuals who have more specific expertise in those above grade deconstruction, environmental related deconstruction activities. So when we started to look for a company that would be able to serve this role, that's one of the things that we were looking for, a company that had both environmental deconstruction experience and licensed site professional experience. We were looking for a company also that had extensive local experience, so had experience working in the city of Boston and surrounding communities. We also specifically wanted to look for individuals who had experience working in this type of setting, so working with members of the community or municipalities on these big, important projects. We were looking for a firm with a stellar professional reputation. And the last thing I want to point out is that we were looking for a firm that HRP had not already engaged to be the owner's consultant on another project, so that we knew that they would be independent from our other ongoing work. So after an extensive vetting process, we selected GZA, who I'd mentioned before, to serve in this role. During deconstruction, they will have access to abatement and soil and groundwater associated plans. They'll have access to regular reports and data. We'll share those reports and data with GZA. Those reports will also be made available to the public, but if you don't feel like reading very long regulatory reports, you can have GZA read them for you and then ask them questions. As we are tonight and as we move forward, GZA will be available in public meetings to answer questions and to follow up on reports that will be made available to them. I'm going to hand over now to Marianne Saponara, who is the LSP at GZA that I mentioned. Marianne will give you a little bit of background on GZA as a company and then on her background as well. Marianne?
Thanks, Juliana. My name is Marianne Saponara, and I'm a vice president at GZA. First, as Juliana said, I'll tell you a little bit about the company. Then my colleague Rebecca and I will each give you a brief overview of our experience and qualifications. So GZA is an environmental and geotechnical engineering firm founded in Massachusetts with over 50 years of experience in and around Boston. Our headquarters are in Norwood, and we have 30 offices, 17 of which are located right here in New England. GZA employs over 700 people working in the fields of environmental science, engineering, water resources, construction management, and civil and geotechnical engineering. Some of the services provided that are relevant to the L Street redevelopment include environmental and LSP professional services, site investigation and remediation, environmental health and safety, regulatory compliance, air quality, permitting, monitoring, project design and construction management on projects with regulated materials such as asbestos, heavy metals, PCBs, facility decommissioning and deconstruction, asbestos inspection and monitoring, and certified industrial hygienist services. Next slide, please. My background is in environmental engineering with a degree from MIT, and I'm a licensed site professional in the state of Massachusetts. I have over 22 years of experience, and my projects have ranged from environmental assessments to complex redevelopments. I've worked extensively in designing and implementing subsurface remedial strategies, as well as in above ground construction management. And now I'll hand things over to Rebecca so she can introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Cox. My personal background is that I'm a registered professional engineer with GZA for 19 years. As a senior project manager, my professional experience includes design, management, and oversight of facility decommissioning and deconstruction projects. Particularly, my experience involves projects where asbestos abatement and management of regulated materials is required. I have served as project manager and technical lead for numerous complex abatement and demolition projects for major utility clients throughout the Northeast. Marianne and I look forward to supporting the South Boston community during the L Street project. Later in this presentation, an email address will be provided for you to reach us directly with any environmental questions you may have. And next, you'll hear from David Pearson from Northstar Demolition, who will provide additional background on Northstar and their project approach.
Thank you, Rebecca, the project group, and most importantly, the community stakeholders for taking the time and allowing us the opportunity to share some background on Northstar, our team, and our plan to safely abate and deconstruct the L Street station. We will do this by hiring and sourcing local labor and vendors. As Melissa stated, Northstar has been in the Boston market with our Everett shop for 33 years. Our team for this project consists of Craig Pearson, 30 years with Northstar. He will be managing the abatement aspect of the project. Also with Northstar, and on the screen is Jeremy Thoreau, 20 years experience in industrial demolition. Jeremy will be the lead for deconstruction. I am David Pearson, 33 years with Northstar and president of the local Northstar office. We all have been doing abatement and deconstruction our entire careers. Recently completed similar jobs include the Paletti Power Station in Queens, New York, the Martin plant in Indiantown, Florida, the Purvis R.D. Morrow plant in Purvis, Mississippi, and the Crawford plant in Chicago. I highlight these because they are located in sensitive areas and we utilize similar abatement and dismantling techniques as we're going to use at the L Street station. We just completed 270 Park Ave in Manhattan, the tallest building ever deconstructed, using cranes, high torchmen, and lowering building components to the ground. This building was 52 stories and over 700 feet tall. And we are actively decommissioning 2 nuclear power plants, one in Vermont and one in Florida. Locally, we have recently completed the asbestos abatement at the Braden Point Power Plant in Somerset, Mass. Similar in that the neighbors and community were engaged and active, and our 1-year-long process went without incident. Closer to home, we're at 1 Post Office Square, a 42-story building. Well, currently it's a 40-story high-rise because we removed the top 2 stories of the building via cranes. Similar to L Street, we dismantled their 9-story parking garage, all while keeping the adjacent roads open and safe. Similar to L Street, we are using cranes to pick and lower large components, being the concrete facade panels. We are commencing the deconstruction of a 30-story residential building in Cambridge on an active college campus with similar logistics and constraints as L Street. In the plaza at Boston City Hall, you may have seen us segmenting and picking large sections of the concrete vault shaft from above the active MBTA and all within our city officials' views. And right here in South Boston, you may have seen us remove the iconic Whiskey Priest and the long-loved Anthony's Pier 4. For 33 years, we have been signatory with the laborers, in particular, Local 223, and we are signatory with the operating engineers, Local 4. We remain in constant communication with these unions and are collectively prepared for this work. On a yearly basis, we employ somewhere between 250,000 and 350,000 person hours. Our OSHA recordable rate is under 1 in an industry where 3 is the average. We estimate the L Street work will require up to 75 workers at peak. Next slide, please. Moving on to our project approach, as stated, no explosives or tripping or tipping of large elements will be utilized. We have a 20-month schedule in which all structures will be fully abated prior to being carefully dismantled. Abatement will be performed in regulated containments. Next slide, please. The approach to abate the buildings requires that the workforce is licensed and trained. The work will be done in tented containment enclosures where doors, windows, vents, and penetrations are sealed. Specialized machines with HEPA filters will clean and control the air within the containments. Personnel in loadout chambers will be erected for each containment to manage the ingress and egress. All waste will be properly packaged and removed from the site. Independent verification of work completeness will be done by TRC. To better visualize this process, let's walk through the next slide, please. A site-wide survey has been completed by TRC using existing information and additional sampling where required, all to identify the types and locations of asbestos. This survey is used by us, Northstar, to create a work plan and to submit notification of our procedures, work plans, times, and materials to be removed. This is submitted to both the city and state, and this plan is in its final review stages. Once permitted, the buildings are systematically contained where the doors, windows, vents, louvers, and penetrations are sealed. The HEPA filtered equipment is utilized to clean and filter the air. Decon chambers and waste loadouts are erected for each containment, and licensed and trained asbestos technicians donning suits, respirators, and safety gear commence the activity of removing and packaging the asbestos. The packaged waste is then placed in transportation bins, which will be lined, sealed, and hauled to their disposal site. Each work zone or containment will then be inspected by TRC for completeness of work, ensuring visual cleanliness and air sampling to achieve air clearance criteria. This type of regimen will continue throughout all the buildings. It's important to note that all of this work is done by a licensed contractor, Northstar, with a third-party consultant, TRC, and an independent environmental reviewer, GZA. In addition, the state and local inspectors have absolute authority to hold random inspections of the work. As removal is completed, the building deconstruction will be happening, and I'd like to turn the project overview to Chris from Suffolk for discussions on this.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. And good evening. My name is Chris Hersey. I'm the project executive with Suffolk Construction. I'm going to run you through 2 slides here as a preface to the construction sequencing, and then I'll turn it over to Northstar to walk through that sequence. This slide you're looking at is the existing condition of the project. The project is bounded by East First Street to the south, Summer Street to the west, and the dedicated freight corridor, the DFC, to the north. The L Street Station deconstruction will start from the north of the project and work south. The north of the project, for your reference, is the top left corner of the image. At the bottom left of the image, you'll see a legend, and I want to highlight this so you understand the sequence of the slides and what they mean. I'll walk you through the background of this legend. Dark gray pertains to any buildings that are to remain on the project. As we walk through the sequence, you'll notice the dark gray will remain in the center. These are the turbine halls. Abatement and deconstruction work will take place from north to south, as I mentioned. Pink areas will happen first, which is the abatement, and will be followed by purple deconstruction. The project will progress and step in this manner from the north to south. On the next slide, from month 1, you'll see the site fencing as yellow, gates in green, as said on the legend. Next slide, please. This is month 1 of the project, which is the startup of the project. You'll note a highlighted yellow site perimeter fence that will be maintained throughout the lifetime of the project. We will also have 24/7 site security through the project. The green highlighted areas with the arrows are the main gates to the project. We're currently working through approvals for access off Summer Street as the main trucking routes. We'll show you trucking routes that are a little more detailed further on in the presentation. The purpose of these gates is to keep truck traffic off of East First Street and the neighborhood. Added to this, there will be staff parking for job site trailers located in the southeast corner, that's the top right of the project. And there will be access off of East First Street just for staff. Areas of particular focus as we go through this sequence are the protection of Summer Street and East First Street. These will be scaffolded, scrimmed and protected with netting, as well as the brick chimney on the project, which you can see on this image right here. These will all be initial areas of the project deconstruction and will have high focus. With that, I'll hand it over to Jeremy Thrud from Northstar to walk through the deconstruction sequence.
Thank you, Chris. With that, we would like to walk you through the planned sequencing of the deconstruction efforts that are going to be taking place at the site over the next 20 months, which, as you've heard, will flow from a north to south manner across the site, with abatement being completed prior to the commencement of the deconstruction phase in each structure. As Chris stated, during this initial site preparation phase, installation of all the site safety and security measures will take place, ensuring all public safety components are in position prior to any additional activities taking place at the site. Due to the age and condition of the structures throughout the site, the team will disconnect and make safe all the utilities, clean and organize the site, and install temporary construction elements that are necessary to create safe access areas for the work that will follow. Additionally, our structural engineers and our operations team will continue to finalize the as-built conditions review of all the structures in the facility to verify the deconstruction design before moving forward. The team has elected to progress through the overall deconstruction work in a north to south manner to reduce the duration of work visible to the adjacent neighborhood. This includes leaving the facades along Summer Street and East First Street intact as long as possible to maximize protection for the abutting neighborhood. During this initial period, regulated materials abatement will be commencing at the site, primarily in the new turbine hall and various outbuildings of the site, as highlighted in purple on this slide. The brick stack deconstruction, as shown in orange on this slide, will commence with verifying environmental abatement has been completed, followed by a full height scaffold installation to prepare it for the piece by piece dismantlement, which will take place under the fully screened enclosure at the site. On to the next slide. As we continue into months 2 and 3 of work, after all site preparation work is completed and all the safety measures are in place, we'll begin additional work activities at the site. Regulated materials abatement will move to the cold storage area, 1898 edition, transformer house, and the new Boston building. Those are as well highlighted in purple on this slide. Deconstruction activities will then commence on the site during this phase in areas that have the abatement completed, including the dismantlement of the masonry stack, which will take place by removing the materials through the structure behind the fully enclosed scaffolding system described earlier. Work will also begin on the new turbine hall, control building, and intake structures as they have been fully abated previously. These deconstruction areas are highlighted in red on this slide. Moving forward into months 4 through 6 on the next slide, abatement will continue at the site, moving primarily to the main boiler house and the switch house during this phase. Deconstruction efforts will continue to ramp up at the site as work continues at the new turbine hall. Additionally, work will begin on the cold storage and transformer buildings at this time, with work beginning in earnest on the dismantlement of the new Boston building, which includes the installation of the scaffold and screening system along Summer Street, as shown in orange on this slide, as Chris mentioned earlier. This will take place at the high boilers, where the piece by piece deconstruction of the structure will be taking place utilizing a cut and pick methodology. On the next slide, moving forward to months 7 through 9, regulated materials abatement will continue in the main boiler house. Deconstruction efforts will continue at the site, completing the east transformer and switch house buildings, bringing the full dismantlement efforts at the new Boston building to the forefront, where the large lattice boom crane will be picking and lowering sections of the boiler superstructure to the ground, continuing from north to south across the site. Just to reiterate what Melissa and others have stated throughout this presentation, this is a deconstruction effort. Northstar will not be implementing any major felling, structure tripping, implosions, or explosives at the site. On to the next slide as we move forward to months 10 through 15, regulated materials abatement will come to a completion at the site. Additionally, during this time frame, deconstruction efforts will continue at the new Boston building, with additional work beginning on the main boiler house directly to the south of the new Boston building on the slide. As we approach the end of the abatement activities, the team has elected to add additional layers of protection along the facade of the 1922 boiler house as it interfaces with East First Street. A full height scaffold, 2 layers of decking, and screening will be installed prior to the top-down deconstruction efforts taking place as we move forward. On the next slide, as we continue into months 16 through 19, the boiler house deconstruction will continue working its way to the south end of the property. The 1922 boiler house will be deconstructed in a floor-by-floor method, piecemealing sections down in a cut and pick manner similar to the new Boston building. This material will funnel through the interior of the site, eliminating truck routing onto East First Street. After all remaining superstructures are removed at the site, the below grade removals will follow. Moving forward, finally to month 20, the site deconstruction efforts will be concluded. At this point, the team will complete the final grading. The historic buildings highlighted in the dark gray will remain preserved at the site, and the site will be prepared for the future development efforts. With that, I'm turning it back over to Chris with Suffolk to talk through the truck routing and additional construction mitigation measures that will be in place for the duration of the project.
Thanks, Jeremy. I'll walk you through first trucking. Truck routes for the project, as you see on the image in front of you, they are illustrated with the inbound and outbound truck routes going north and south on Summer Street. All trucks will either come from the north or leave to the north. Truck traffic will average around 20 to 25 trucks per day throughout the project. And trucks are not going to be routed down East First Street. We are keeping that free of trucks. A quick traffic and sidewalk update. This is similar to the last public meeting. Parking and sidewalks will not be affected on either Summer Street or East First Street simultaneously. So it'll either be one or the other. Months 1 through 15, as shown on this slide, are Summer Street work. No travel lanes will be closed during the construction on Summer Street. Pedestrians will be rerouted to the west sidewalk. That's the orange dash line. If you refer to the insert of the upper right-hand side of the image, you'll note, and Jeremy spoke to this, there's scaffolding and a debris screen that's going to be erected on the sidewalk along the wall on Summer Street for public protection as a belts and suspenders approach to safety. You'll see this at a number of places on our approach. And understanding the number 7 bus stop is a lifeline for the neighborhood. It will be kept open and protected throughout the life of this project. On the next slide are months 16 through 20, which is East First Street construction. Similar to Summer Street work, no travel lanes will be closed during this deconstruction. Summer Street will be returned to its layout prior to the start of this work. Pedestrians will be rerouted to the south on the sidewalk. That is the orange dotted line. And if you refer to this insert on the far right-hand side, there's additional scaffolding here that we're going to put up along Boiler House 2 to protect during the construction, and that'll protect the sidewalk and the public. Again, to reiterate, in this phase, existing 7 bus stop will be protected and maintained throughout the lifetime of this project. Next, we have a new slide to this presentation. In response to comments from public officials and the public during the last community meeting, the team is working on sourcing local parking close to the site. Our goal is to minimize traffic impacts to the neighborhood and to coordinate and organize worker access to the job. Since on-site parking is limited, we're looking into local options through negotiations with private lots near the site. We encourage workers to park in these source parking lots proximal to the project site, but we also highly encourage those to take public transportation to the project. We understand that work performed on this project not only affects the immediate site, but also can potentially affect the adjacent neighborhood. Therefore, we formulated a number of construction mitigative measures that I'll review. First on the list is rodent control. Rodent control was an area discussed in the last public meeting quite a bit. We heard you. We heard your feedback from Councilor Flynn and the community, and we've made updates to our plan. And following is the approach. Bullet 3 is where the real changes are made. So I'll go through the first 2. Firstly, the project site has been continuously monitored over the last 5 years under the ownership of HRP Redgate. For the upcoming deconstruction project, a rodent control site survey will be performed. A licensed exterminator will reevaluate the current conditions on site and determine where there may be potential issues on the site. This licensed exterminator will bait and trap in compliance with City of Boston regulations. On top of that, we have increased the licensed exterminator site inspections from every other week to weekly. Also, the project staff will perform daily monitoring of the site throughout the project. Next slide is on noise control and following our measures on how we're going to mitigate and monitor noise. Firstly, work will be performed during the City of Boston hours, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., with Saturdays requiring City of Boston permitting. Quiet work will take place during the second shift interior to the buildings for abatement, safety, and also in preparation for the next day shift. Noise levels are to be maintained within the City of Boston limits for construction. During the life of the project, noise monitors will be set up to detect any exceedance of allowable limits. If we do exceed allowable limits, we will stop work and readdress so that our construction is under those limits. Work is being coordinated and planned to minimize noise, and we're not expecting any high impact or vibratory activities. For the vibration monitoring on the next slide, there are two parts to vibration monitoring on this project. First, there'll be continuous on-site vibration monitoring on the project. Second, additional locations in the neighborhood will be identified where off-site vibratory monitoring will take place. The intention of the vibration monitoring is to track and maintain levels within allowable thresholds. Existing condition survey for abutting properties this next slide has two main areas as well. Firstly, properties immediately adjacent to the project will be externally surveyed prior to the start of work. Additionally, property owners will have the option to have an interior property survey. How is this interior property survey opted into? Well, the survey team has already sent letters to abutting property owners. A second round of letters will be sent to abutters this week, along with flyers to be distributed to abutters. The deadline for this second round of interior surveys is 10 days from now, October 29th, 2021. That's for signing up for it. Dust mitigation on the project is a major focus for the team. Water will be utilized for dust control during the duration of and all phases of the project work. This includes washing down equipment, wheel washes for equipment, misting during deconstruction activities, and the maintenance of stockpiles on the project site. For a more detailed run-through on engineering controls to be utilized during deconstruction, Jeremy Tharud will run through them.
Thanks, Chris. Northstar, we will be utilizing various types of engineered mitigation controls of the site to eliminate dust migration from the site throughout the entirety of this project. We'll be utilizing direct spray, heavy equipment plumbed with spray nozzles, and water misting cannons such as dust bosses, as shown on the bottom right-hand photo of the slide. These will be utilized throughout the site depending on the specific work activity taking place to take advantage of their best attributes. The engineering controls will be adjusted throughout each workday and monitored as conditions change. Haul roads and stockpiles will be monitored multiple times during each shift to eliminate off-site dust migration. Additionally, we'll be monitoring our mitigation efforts throughout each shift, utilizing visual inspections and a daily log of all work activities to verify the conditions encountered at the site and the successful implementation of our engineering controls for dust mitigation that were employed throughout each shift. With that, I'll turn it over to Juliana Connolly with HRP to discuss the perimeter air monitoring aspects.
Thanks, Jeremy. Hi, everyone. So we wanted to talk for a minute about, in addition to the mitigation, so the dust mitigation measures that Jeremy just spoke about, we want to talk about some monitoring that we'll be doing at the perimeter of the property. And the purpose of the perimeter dust monitoring is essentially to confirm, to double check that those mitigation measures are working. So I just want to make that point very clear to people from the beginning. So the mitigation, the use of water to suppress dust and those other activities that Jeremy talked about, those are the specific activities to maintain dust levels at low concentrations. And then we're not going to just assume that those mitigation measures work. We're going to monitor continuously dust concentrations at the perimeter of the property so that we can know in real time if we're seeing dust levels increase that we need to do something about. So I just want to make sure that that message comes through, that that's the purpose of this monitoring. So you'll hear us talk about this as perimeter dust monitoring. Sanborn Head Associates, who we talked about earlier today, who's our licensed site professional and environmental consultant on the project, will be doing this monitoring for us. And they'll have dust monitors. So these will be specific equipment. They're mounted on stands so that they can measure dust at sort of the breathing level. They're equipped with solar panels so that they can operate even if there's not a consistent power source available at the property. And they'll be located at the perimeter of the property. We'll have 2 on East First Street, 2 on Summer Street, and then 1 each on the other 2 sides of the property that don't face the community directly. So there'll be 6 of those locations, 2 on 2 sides, and then 1 on each of the 3rd and 4th side. The way that we'll use these data is in a very proactive way. So the data are collected and continuously over sort of 15 minutes and just keep going. Every 15 minutes, we'll get a new reading. Those data are then uploaded to a website where we are alerted in real time if dust levels start to increase into a level of potential concern. So we'll get notified, Sanborn Head will get notified, ownership will get notified. We'll know in real time if those dust concentrations start to increase. This gives us an opportunity to come out to the site, say, hey, at monitor 2, we're starting to see dust levels creep up a little bit. What can we do to adjust those mitigation measures to keep those dust levels back down? So the monitoring is, in addition to being a way to know what those dust levels are, they also allow us to be very proactive in making sure that those mitigation measures that Jeremy talked about are really doing what they're intended to do. The specific details of this dust monitoring program that we're talking about will be written up in a dust monitoring plan. So it'll talk about the specific monitoring equipment that we'll use, how those data are shared up to the cloud, as I indicated, and how we're notified in real time. That will be all documented in a written plan that we will both share on Suffolk's website associated with this project. We'll also share that with GZA so they can read it separately and can answer any questions. Of course, we're available, ownership is available to answer any questions, but if you want to ask a question to somebody that is not part of ownership or working directly for ownership, you could ask those questions to GZA. Then the results that we get, those will be validated. So it's very important when we're collecting analytical data like this dust data, that data all get checked out before we publish that data up to the website. But we'll be planning to do that monthly. We'll have a monthly report that will show all the dust results. There'll also be a written narrative that will describe what we observed during that prior month, and if there were any occasions where we saw dust levels start to creep up, what actions were taken in response to that. But so the whole point here is having a system in place that allows us to very proactively manage dust so that we know if the dust concentrations are increasing and can then take actions before those dust concentrations increase to a level that might be of a potential problem for the community. So that's the dust monitoring that we'll be doing, again, to confirm that the dust mitigation procedures that are in place at the site are doing their job. I'm going to hand this over next to Mike McCaffrey at TRC to talk about the asbestos abatement work.
Thank you, Juliana. Hello, I'm Michael McCaffrey, Vice President of the Building Science and Industrial Hygiene, Industrial Air Quality Group at TRC. TRC is a national firm that has 4 local offices in Boston, Weymouth, Woburn, and Lowell. TRC was hired by HRP to conduct a comprehensive site survey that identifies regulated waste, the specific locations and approximate quantities of these materials. Team of licensed asbestos inspectors who identified suspect building materials and physically collected samples for analysis of these materials was utilized. TRC then developed a site-specific specification for the removal of the regulated materials. That specification was designed by a Massachusetts licensed designer. TRC shall review and submit an asbestos abatement plan to Mass DEP for their approval. Notifications of the project start date shall be submitted to DEP and the City of Boston. Both Mass DEP and the City of Boston shall perform unscheduled periodic site inspections. During asbestos abatement activities, TRC shall provide Massachusetts licensed asbestos project monitors who will run air samples in areas adjacent to the abatement containment areas. Once asbestos abatement is complete, TRC shall collect final air clearance samples in each abatement containment. Once the clearance samples are analyzed and determined to be below the clearance criterion, the abatement in those containments shall be complete. Back to you, George.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And good evening, everyone. My name is George Needs, and I am Vice President of Mixed Use Development here at HRP. Firstly, I wanted to quickly talk through some of the many great resources that we have available to make sure that all your questions and concerns are heard and addressed around the clock. As mentioned earlier in the presentation, GZA will be performing the role of independent environmental reviewer and will be independently overseeing all abatement and environmental remediation activities associated with the deconstruction project. We have provided their contact email address on the screen, and they can be reached directly via email at lstreet@gza.com. So should you have any concerns around this aspect of the project, feel free to email your questions and your concerns to that email address and someone will get back to you. We will continue to have ongoing community meetings as we've done leading up to the start of the deconstruction to provide status updates associated with the deconstruction project. However, you can access the website anytime, which provides a whole host of information associated with the project. That website address is www.suffolk-lstreetstationboston.com. And on it, you can find a number of useful resources. There's the direct hotline to Suffolk Construction. This is available and open 24/7 should you have any urgent and immediate concerns. We also have an online portal where you can submit your questions and concerns, and someone from our team will get back to you right away. All weekly project progress will be published along with upcoming work activities, including updates to any temporary sidewalk and traffic impacts. And additionally, there is a comprehensive visual overview of the project sequencing, as well as an archive of all community presentations and questions and answers that can be accessed whenever that have been provided to date. Lastly, you can subscribe to receive all project-related updates and notifications. As this is intended to be the last community meeting ahead of our anticipated November commencement, we will be sending out a notification to all those subscribers once the exact date has been confirmed and set. So we encourage you all to go on, subscribe, and you'll get your notifications directly to your email address. Again, just to reiterate the email address, that is www.suffolk-lstreetstationboston.com. We're also pleased to highlight some of the wonderful employment and apprenticeship initiatives that we'll be implementing as part of an extensive community benefits package that this project will deliver. A number of these opportunities commence upon receiving the demolition permit and will continue during active construction and will be available to city residents and the South Boston community. We've committed to working with local veterans groups to promote construction trade job opportunities and ensure that this valiant community has the opportunities they deserve. We'll be hosting annual job fairs to promote construction trade job opportunities to local high school students, and we'll be targeting at least 20% of apprentices on the project coming from the Building Pathways graduates. And in an effort to support that program further, we'll be working with the City of Boston to dedicate at least $100,000 of the linkage contribution to the Building Pathways program. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dara Frederick to talk about those in more detail.
Awesome. Thank you so much, George. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dara Frederick, and I am a trade partner diversity here at Suffolk Construction. I work very closely with our project teams from the start to the finish of on any given project to really lead a variety of diversity initiatives, community outreach and engagement, but to overall ensure that diversity and inclusion is satisfied and is represented across all of our projects. I would say that we are very committed to building the communities in which we build, and we do look forward to having intentional impact by really creating some real opportunities and pathways for local job seekers, veterans, and the students within South Boston, as well as the surrounding communities. As George mentioned, this project is slated to create about 2,500 permanent jobs, 1,500 of those jobs being within construction across all trades, 20% which will come from apprentice graduates. I must say that as we really set out to meet these commitments, we couldn't do this work without our partners. So listed here is just a few that will be supporting the kickoff for our first job fair, which you will hear a little bit more about. And that's Building Pathways, Youth Build Boston, the New England Regional Carpenters Council, Metro Building Trade Council, as well as Excel High School. Now, when we were going through the logistical planning and putting together this job fair, we really wanted to make sure that we were being very intentional within our outreach methods and our approach while engaging local job seekers, veterans, and students to ensure that we're really building that awareness of the opportunities that's going to be in existence for the life on this project. So several of the key outreach partners are also listed here. And you would see that is, again, the high schools, Excel High School, we have Madison Park High, engaging with Boston Public Schools, the City of Boston, the BRJP office, Boston Residency Job Policy, the Office of Workforce Development, the Boston Housing Authority, and again, reaching our veteran population through Helmets to Hard Hats, Mass Fallen Heroes, and the Department of Veteran Affairs. Next slide, please. So we do have, as mentioned before, our job fair is going to be kicking off on November 1st at 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. Again, this is going to be an annual job fair. What you can expect to gain from attending this job fair is hearing from our project team, gaining the exposure to what are the career paths in construction, specifically on this project. You'll be also hearing from our local union to find out and learn what is the process and the requirements for union apprenticeship applications. Also, you'll be hearing from the pre-apprenticeship programs, what are those opportunities and how do you apply? Again, what are the requirements? I'm happy to announce that we are still taking applications and registration for this job fair right up until the event date. As of now, we do have about 17 registered and still counting. So please feel free to visit this website, go to the project site, register, pass it along to anyone that you know that might be interested in attending. Another thing, a couple things that we're doing just to share in closing is we do also have walk-on applications that we make available, and we ensure that we place these applications in visible locations so our community are able to actually see these applications. How it works is it's a QR code system. So you just basically scan the QR code, you'll be asked a series of questions, and this is monitored in the back office by our team. So we're able to then get that information. We reach out to the applicants directly, and then we're able to engage further with them to help them identify what are these opportunities available for them specifically. A couple of things that we will also be doing is we'll be hosting a career fair later on in the year. The targeted goal for that is this winter in December. And the career fair is going to be at Excel High School. Again, very, very specific on focusing on building that awareness for our students, reaching out to the young kids as early as possible. We really do these events as early as middle school. You know, the earlier we can actually reach our students, it has proven to really gauge their interest for the many opportunities that's available within construction. So we're really excited about that, really excited about our partnership with Excel High School. We'll also be doing some OSHA 10 training in the spring of next year. That's going to be led directly by Suffolk Safety Team. So that is going to be also something that's available, open to the community, which Suffolk and our team and partners will be able to provide this free training to everyone as well. In addition, we'll be also having some site visits, which is really the fun part. Students really enjoy being able to come and really have that visual and see firsthand what's really happening in their backyard. So we really look forward to the site visits. We'll be doing that in the spring as well. All these events is going to be posted on the project website, so you can definitely keep abreast on these events as they are going to be rolled out next year. So in closing, I mean, I would just say that we do really look forward to push this work forward. We look forward to being good neighbors. We look forward to creating opportunities for residents within South Boston and the surrounding communities. And I just want to thank HRP and Redgate and our many other partners for the partnership in the work that's ahead. So I'll turn it right back over to you, George.
Thank you, Dara. And in addition to the workforce development initiatives that we'll be implementing, we wanted to highlight some of the other community partnerships we've been involved in over the last 4 years. These partnerships go beyond the commitments we made as part of our community benefits package made through the formal entitlement process and are far-reaching throughout the South Boston community. Last year, we participated in the City of Boston Winter Coat Drive, where we donated over 2,300 new winter coats to ensure those in need stay warm during the cold winter months, as well as contributing over 9,600 new items of clothing to the Salvation Army to be distributed throughout the local community. We're excited to announce our upcoming turkey drive, where we'll be donating 1,000 turkeys to individuals, families, and organizations in need to make sure everyone can enjoy this special time of year. We'll be coordinating that through the South Boston Association of Nonprofits, which is scheduled for November 19th. These are just some of the activities we've been involved in, and we look forward to finding more opportunities over the life of this project. Lastly, we will continue to host ongoing and periodic community meetings to provide updates on the deconstruction. And while we don't have set dates yet for those meetings, we will notify the community with plenty of advance notice through our online social media platforms, in local newspapers, and via email. On the timing of the project, we anticipate starting the deconstruction project in November, subject to receiving all our necessary permits and approvals. As soon as we have a start date confirmed, we will publicize this through all the channels I just mentioned. And again, please use our website as a resource to ask questions, track progress, and receive updates. Again, that address is www.suffolk-lstreetstationboston.com, which you can sign up to receive all notifications directly to your email. So that concludes our presentation. And with that, I'll hand it back over to April Anderson.
Thank you so much, George, and thank you, everybody. We are very pleased tonight to have a number of our elected officials on the line with us. So now we would like to open the opportunity for them to share a few words or ask some direct questions of the team before we open it up to the Q&A generally. So I'll start with you, Councillor Flynn. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, April, and thank you to your team for presenting tonight. I know the presentation was almost an hour and 15 minutes or so, and there's a lot of questions that are in the chat, so I don't want to take up all of the time. But I won't ask questions because I know you'll get to some of the ones that will be asked. But just want to make a couple of comments. Listening to the presentation, the dust, the impact dust will have on the residents will be significant. Not sure about updating residents monthly on a website is sufficient. That would need to be at least weekly, in my opinion. The pest control, having someone on site monitoring and baiting for rats and mice weekly is, in my opinion, is not sufficient. It needs to be daily. We need to have someone down there full-time specifically on this issue. As a district city council, I spend a significant amount of my time on pest control throughout the district. And this project is going to have a major impact on the quality of life for residents. So, you know, having that done weekly, in my opinion, is not sufficient. I'd ask for someone to be down there full-time every day, because that's how important that task will be. I have other related questions and comments, but when you're taking down the stack itself, what has your team learned about in terms of health risks for the neighborhood? We had a major fire there. I guess it was about 20 years ago, either an 8 or a 9 alarm fire. What impact has that fire had on your planning, and obviously the number of cases of cancer related to the Boston Edison plant, scleroderma and respiratory related issues? So I'll stop there. I have a lot of concerns about what I heard tonight, but I wanted to put those on record right now and see what your response is.
Thank you, Counselor. Melissa or Juliana, would you like to respond to the counselor's questions and comments?
I can speak to a couple of them, Counselor, specifically the question on dust, and there are some questions from the public with respect to the dust as well, and we'll get to those. I do want to answer your specific comment about the weekly versus monthly. I want to make really clear, and we'll get into this in the public's question as well, that the dust mitigation that we have planned and then the dust monitoring that I described will allow us to control dust levels so that we do not get to levels that could be a problem in the community. And so what I mean by that is we'll be monitoring those dust levels in real time. If we see them start to creep up, we can make adjustments. And if necessary, we can stop work until we have an adjustment in place that keeps those dust levels down. One of the other questions we got related to dust that I saw in the Q&A, and we'll get into this perhaps more later, April, as we go into those specific questions, is, and we've seen this maybe in some of the other email comments we've gotten since the last meeting, is how will the public be notified in real time? And I understand where that question comes from. I think, which is, for an example, if there's a hurricane coming, right? If there's some threat that's coming, there are notifications that can be made to the public to allow the public to take an action to protect themselves from that condition. I want to be really clear that this is not what we're talking about here for two reasons. The first is that the dust that we're talking about, exposure to dust is not an acute response, okay? So it's not a short term, like if it's there for 5 minutes, it would cause an effect. That's not how exposure to dust works. So it's not that type of response. So we'll be monitoring on very short intervals, 15 minutes. We'll be able to take very quick responsive actions, but it's not something like if we see the dust creep up for a minute or two, there will be a community health outcome from that. That's not how exposure to dust works. I just want to make sure that concept is clear to people, that it's not a short-term thing, that if we start to creep up for 1 minute or 15 minutes, we are able to take real-time response actions, and so we won't get to those levels. That's what the dust monitoring is for. The second concept I want to just talk about in that idea, where will we be notified so we can do something about it? I really want to be clear. There is not a response if the dust levels start to creep up. There is not a response from the public that we expect the community to need to take, if that makes sense. So if those dust levels creep up, and we see that, the response and the responsibility to correct that will lie with ownership and with Suffolk and with Northstar to get those dust levels back down, to make sure that those mitigation measures are working. So we don't have a real-time notification to members of the community, because we are not asking members of the community to do anything in response to those dust levels that may start to creep up. We will need to do something to get those dust levels back down. So those are two concepts that I just wanted to make sure were clear. With respect to the weekly versus monthly, there is, as you can probably get the sense of, we're going to have a huge amount of data, because we will be collecting data every 15 minutes from 6 locations, which is going to be a very large data set that does take some time to do the quality assurance. I would not want to put data out to the public that has not been appropriately what we describe as QC, so quality control, that all of that analytical data does need to be evaluated by a data specialist, and so that does take some time. So while we will have data in real time to respond, it is very important that we do review the data quality before we put a published report out to the public. Melissa, did you want to follow up on any of the other comments?
Yeah, maybe I'll speak to Councillor Flynn's question about the rodent control. So, and there are a number of questions in the chat. I think a lot of people were entering them before we got to that section. So hopefully we've addressed a lot of people's concerns, but I definitely want to address your concern, Councillor Flynn, because we actually do consider this a daily monitoring for rodents. What we're saying is that we're doubling the program, right, where there'll be traps and bait set all around the site, on the site and the perimeter of the site, in order to deal with any kind of rodent issues. And we're not, that will occur. We understand that. And we'll have the licensed exterminator out. We're doubling that from what the city requires to once a week, but our on-site personnel will also be checking those traps daily. And should they see an uptick, they will call the exterminator, and the exterminator will come out and either deal with that by increasing the traps, changing the methodology or the techniques. So we actually do consider this a daily monitoring of the rodent control program. And if what we've put in place is not working, if there are issues in the surrounding community, we will work to modify that program.
Well, Melissa, I know from experience on pest control, I know it as well as anyone in the city, that your plan on pest control is not adequate. And I'm expecting significant health and environmental related issues, public health issues. I'd ask for a better plan on pest control because the plan you guys have is not sufficient.
Well, as I said, we have doubled it from the last time, and we do believe that it is a daily plan, Councillor Flynn, but we will take another look at it.
I mean, we're right across the street from Medal of Honor Park. There's children there that play all day long. It's a beautiful park. There's residents right across the street. The residents will call me up about pest control, and we'll have a difficult time reaching the development team. So I'm asking respectfully to come back with a better plan on pest control.
Okay, well, let us look at it again, Councillor Flynn. Our intent, of course, is that we're aligned. We don't want there to be a rodent problem in the neighborhood. We know that since we've all been home and since COVID has started, there's been an uptick in the rodent problem across the city. All the neighborhoods are dealing with that. And so we understand that that's an issue.
Well, thank you. I'm not going to ask any more questions or comments. I want to let my neighbors speak. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Counselor. I did see Counselor Flaherty's office was here. Don't know if they are still here. I believe he is maybe at another event this evening. So I don't see him, but we can come back. I think Representative Beal is on the line.
Yes, good evening, April, and good evening, everyone. Just wanted to a few questions / comments. I believe there are 20 in the Q&A, 22 now in the Q&A. So want to be respectful and listen to my neighbors' thoughts and concerns. Do appreciate the work that's been done to re-examine the parking plan. I think what was presented at the last meeting was problematic in having the parking on the other side of the channel. Do want to echo the councilors' concerns and sentiments regarding and comments that were made in the Q&A about dust control and rodents. There is a bus stop near that area. There's a Medal of Honor Park right across the street. So making sure that there aren't any risks to the residents living across the street or anybody using the parks or bus stops will be crucial. Just had one question regarding access in and out. I know that I believe Summer Street was said to be one of the main access points. Just wanted to see if you could flush that out a little bit. I know throughout this 4 or 5 year process, a lot's been discussed around the importance of the Port of Boston and the Butler Freight Corridor, and that's importance to getting our terminal up and running and staying successful. So was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about those dynamics and how that will work on a day-to-day basis here at the site.
Sure.
Can I respond?
Yeah, or does Chris want to jump in?
I'd be happy to answer this one.
Yep.
Yep. That's a good question. I'll start. It's a 2-step answer. Number one, we're working through getting finalized approval for using gates on Summer Street. So those are looked at as the main gates. The usage of the dedicated freight corridor right now, we will be submitting materials to Massport for the limited use of that dedicated freight corridor for just for emergency usage or limited use, subject to their approval. So we're working through that process. So right now we're looking at main traffic, Summer Street for trucks, some limited use for the dedicated freight corridor. We have spoken with Massport. We fully understand how important the dedicated freight corridor is and the Conley terminal, and we are working with them hand in hand.
Well, I appreciate that comment. Just emergency use and limited use are 2 different things to me. The state, federal government have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the dedicated freight corridor. So, anything that may be problematic there from the project site definitely will choke and bottleneck a thriving port. So just want to make sure that you're giving that its proper consideration.
Point taken. Thank you. We are going to submit what we consider emergency use, limited use to them for approval before we move forward with anything. So we will be going through that approval process with them and talking through any usage scenarios with them. So we will keep that communication moving forward.
And Representative Beal, I would just add that we understand and share the sentiment of how important that the dedicated freight corridor is to the thriving of Conley Terminal and its economic impact on the region. So we understand that. And we do have very limited number of trucks throughout the deconstruction phase. So we think that Summer Street will be sufficient.
Okay, Representative Beal, did you have anything else to add?
No, that's at the moment. And if there are any questions, I know how to reach you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just checking one more time for Councilor Flaherty, who I think had to step off, but I do want to make sure everyone knows he was here. And with that, we'll jump right into our Q&A from the public. We have already covered a couple of these questions, but I think it's worthwhile to go through them anyways. The first question was, what is the plan for containing dust and debris from the neighborhood, as well as a later question about families using the Medal of Honor Park and the neighboring playground. So maybe Juliana can just talk about how neighbors can feel confident in this plan and what our plans are.
Thanks, April. Yeah, and I spoke to some of these concepts, but I do think it's important. I'll talk to them again because I really appreciate this question because it does give me an opportunity to get a little more specific into these issues. So the first thing I want people to understand is that there's not going to be a short-term health risk from dust. Okay, it's not the type of thing that if you're exposed to it for a very short period of time, that there could be a health risk. I just want that to be really clear. People shouldn't need to feel worried about that. That's just not how this works. So that's one thing. So, and that gets into the questions about do we need a way to communicate to people in real time? That's the reason why we don't need that type of control. We're not expecting the public to take an action in response to our dust. We will manage the dust. We will make sure that it stays at safe levels, and we are not expecting, nor will we need the public to do anything in response to that. And we will know, so with respect to Medal of Honor Park or people living across the street, you should know, and that's why we're talking here today, that we will be watching those dust levels right across the street. We'll be watching them continuously, and we'll be watching them in real time. And so we'll be able to respond in real time if we see those dust levels start to creep up. And again, I want to be really clear, when we will come in and ask for a mitigation measure to be adjusted or to ask Northstar or Suffolk to take a look at the work that's going on, we're not going to come in when we think there's already been a problem, right? We're monitoring those dust levels in real time. So if dust levels start to increase, that's when we can come in and say, hey, what's going on in this area? Is it a little windy? Do we maybe need to slow this specific activity down until the wind settles down? Do we need to get more water on this activity? We can do that in real time so that we do not get to levels that would potentially be of concern. But the last part I want to say about that, those potentially of concern, again, not concern if it happens for a split second, for 15 minutes, for an hour. That's not the level of concern. I don't want people to have that short-term concern on their minds. It's not the type of exposure that is of concern with dust. April, does that answer the questions that were asked about?
Yeah, so there's just one follow-up question about the monitoring. Can you just describe a little about how that works?
And yeah, so the way that works is they'll look probably just sort of like boxes, but they're dust monitors. What's happening there is there's a little pump in each of these boxes. It's pulling in the air, and then it's measuring the particles that are present in that air. So it's specifically measuring, we call it PM10. So it's particulate matter above 10 microns. So that's the very small sort of diameter of the dust particle. That concentration, so it's the number of dust particles per a specific volume of air. That dust concentration is measured right there in the dust monitor itself. That result, so every 15 minutes at each of these 6 monitors, is then directly uploaded to a website that Sanborn Head will have access to and that ownership will have access to. So we'll know in real time what the dust concentrations are at the perimeter of the property. That website where the data are uploaded to will then be set up to provide automatic notifications if dust concentrations start to increase above levels that we'll set. So we'll say, hey, we're concerned, we want to know about it if dust comes up even this amount, right? I don't want to know about it when it gets to the level that's potentially a problem. I want to know about it way before that. So we'll set those levels. those will automatically notify us if we're starting to see those dust levels, and then we can take those corrective actions that I talked about. Getting more water, maybe stopping a certain activity until the wind subsides, things like that. So those are corrective actions that we can take, that Northstar can take, that Suffolk can take, but there is no requirement for members of the community to take any response. So that's why we won't be notifying in real time. One other thing I just want to point out, April, I know, so we will have all this data in real time, but again, I just do want to reiterate this concept of the data quality needing to be reviewed before the data are then published in a public way. So it would not be responsible for us to just upload all of that analytical data in real time for the public to see. We do need to spend time ensuring that the instrument is doing exactly what it was supposed to do and making sure that those data are appropriately vetted before they're shared publicly. So that's why the reporting back to the public will occur on a standardized schedule monthly with a narrative that allows people to understand the data and interpret it. If there's an issue with the instrument not operating properly or something like that, we wouldn't want to put that data out without being able to explain those issues. That's why the data won't be available in real time to the public, because we cannot do that quality control in real time.
Thank you. There are a couple of questions I think Melissa should probably answer about the direct abutters, both for the vibration monitoring and or the pre-deconstruction inspections. And maybe you can describe how those abutters were identified, what that perimeter is, and what that process looks like.
Sure. So we're defining the immediate perimeter as along East First Street abutting the site and along Summer Street abutting the site. So that one block radius, if you will. One thing for folks to understand, again, is since there's no explosive or implosive techniques here, since there'll be no dropping, falling, or tripping, and since we're not talking about driving piles or things like that, as we're mechanically taking down pieces of the building, we're not expecting large vibration as part of this scope of work. So that's one thing for people to understand, is that it is not anticipated that there will be a lot of vibration. Having said that, we want to monitor it anyway. We obviously have 4 turbine halls on the site that we want to preserve. So we want to make sure that they are protected throughout the process. And then we also want to make sure that our neighbors are protected throughout the process. So we did send out letters to the abutters along First Street and Summer Street, and we're sending out a second round now. We will do exterior, what are called pre-construction surveys, right? So we go along and photograph the existing conditions of everything around us so that we know the state that it was in when we started the work. And then we send letters to folks offering them an option to have us also come in and take photographs of interiors to document the current state of their properties as well. That is optional. But people can respond to us by that letter or contact us through the website, and we will set up a time with our surveyor to come and do that. So again, that's a little bit of a belts and suspenders approach. We're monitoring vibration on site. We'll also be doing a few vibration monitors off-site in localized areas, just to make sure that what we're expecting is happening. And then we're offering the pre-construction surveys as well as optional for the people that are immediately adjacent to us on East First Street and Summer.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions for Chris on the potential impacts or the planned impacts of the bus stop at the corner of East First and Summer. Can you just describe what those impacts will be?
Yeah, I'd be happy to describe. In short, the bus stop will remain and stay where it is now. It will be protected as well. So we will have barriers and fencing around it. There will be signage for it as well, but the bus stop will remain up and running. It will be protected and safe throughout the life of the project, both when work is on Summer Street and work is on East First Street. It is going to remain on the corner of Summer and East First Street, so we're not moving it as well.
Thank you. Chris, also, can you talk about the work hours that are planned for the project and how that would impact Saturdays?
Sure. The work hours are 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. I think this question's about Saturdays. So for Saturdays, we do need to get any Saturday work approved. Right now, we don't have it planned, but things do come up. We do need to get it permitted through the city to do Saturday work. It's generally 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. But certain things can cut into that. That's why we need to get it approved. But that's generally the hours we work.
Thank you. I have a couple more questions for you, Chris.
Sure.
How will traffic be managed on East First in summer?
Good question. East First Street, if you go back, I described what we're doing on East First Street and Summer Street with the barriers for the work. We have to take the sidewalk, and we have to take the first lane of parking, but traffic will remain as is. So the traffic flow and the number of lanes will stay as is, and that will be the life of the project. We will only affect Summer Street or East First Street, but we're not going to work on those at the same time. The first 15 months of the project generally are going to be on Summer Street. 16 through 20 are going to be on East First Street when we're working out there. So we will have any gates that we have, we'll have police details that are going to be there, making sure that traffic is safe, pedestrians are safe, and we'll be watching that very closely.
Thank you. Another question for you, Chris. What are the noise impacts that you expect for the neighbors? What someone asked specifically, will very noisy equipment be used? And then there's a follow-on question. What are the allowable noise limits for the city of Boston?
Sure. That's a detailed question, so I'll try to answer it as best I can in the short term. But there are some areas that you can go on the city websites and look at the noise regulations, namely Regulation 3 or others that are going to affect our work. I'll start the real answer that there will be noise on the project. This is construction. However, we do know what noises the equipment make, and we do factor that into how we're performing work. We will determine all the potential noise sources on the site prior to going out there, and the first line of defense is putting in engineering measures, such as looking at quieter equipment, modifying existing equipment, maintenance of equipment or tools, also putting in any sort of protection or barriers that might help out with noise. All of those are options, and we'll probably have a little of each on the project. City of Boston does have noise regulations. We do need to meet those noise regulations, and we will meet those. All of our submittals and our testing and monitoring will meet all of the requirements of noise on the project. The answer of what exactly is allowed for noise is a little more complex. There are lot and affected property requirements that only allow certain, like 75 decibels or 80 decibels, depending on where you are, and a maximum noise level 86, but it depends on where you are in the project. So it's a little complex. It'll all be spoken to on the City of Boston noise regulations as well, which is on the website.
Thank you. So there's a follow-on question here that I can answer based on what's on the slide. It asks the hours of weekday work that's permitted, and that is 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And Chris already answered the question about weekends and how that works.
Yeah, April, could I add? I'm sorry to interrupt, but
sure, yes.
Just one point there, just because we will have a quiet night shift throughout the project, not for the full length of the project, for a good chunk of the project. That is the work that's going to be interior, quiet work, work that's going to be prepping for the next day of work, or asbestos work where we need to package things up. So I just wanted to let people know there is an interior shift taking place, but that's not allowed. That's an interior quiet shift, but it will happen.
Thank you. And Chris, another question for you about the stack. Can you just describe the mitigation measures for protecting the neighborhood when the stack is coming down?
Yeah, I mean, I can go into this a bit. I might turn this over to either David or Jeremy. So I'll give the quick overview, and then I'd like you guys to, if you want to add a bit of detail to it. So the stack, there are a couple stacks on the project. I'm assuming from this slide we're looking at the orange stack, which is the brick stack. There's some steel stacks that are further to the north, but the brick stack is the one that has real focus on it right now. We will be scaffolding, full scaffold around that all the way up to the top that will have a scrim protection around it. And if Jeremy or David Pearson are on the line, could you speak a little bit to that protection and approach you're taking there?
Yeah, absolutely. So the scaffolded netting and scrim protection will be built around this brick stack all the way up to the top, fully enclosing the stack. And for the dismantlement procedure, the workers will be inside working on the scaffold. They will be taking sections of the brick masonry down and bringing it through the stack, so everything is internalized into the building. So there's no potential for, as you see on videos, any stacks laying out or anything. It's all hand dismantlement of that brick masonry stack. The scaffold will come down as a section comes down, so it'll be fully enclosed the entire time as we get it down to the roof level. On the other two stacks, the steel stacks to the north, those will be the large lattice boom crane. That crane that's out there will be utilized to pick sections, whole sections of that down in pieces and controlled and lowered to the ground. So none of the stacks will be laid out, tripped, pulled over. It's all in place dismantlement.
Chris, on the topic of worker parking, we have a question, or actually a question, I guess, related to what was presented at the September meeting where we had planned to use the Black Falcon terminal parking. The question, really the comment was it's a far walk from the site. And maybe you can explain what the process is for how we're identifying alternative parking places and how the employees will know where those are. Oh, you're on mute.
Hopefully I'm back on. Thank you. We totally agree with you, and that's why we relooked at the worker parking on the project. We did look at Black Falcon Pier, the Dry Dock Ave, those areas. There seems to be a lot of parking there, but it's limited too. So we wanted to look at more closer parking to the project. So we've gone out to local businesses who are actually the best place for us to find parking, and it's probably not going to be 100 worker spots. We're going to have probably 10, 20, 30 here, 10, 20, 30 there, and we'll have multiple areas. So mainly businesses that are around the East First Street on the west side of Summer Street, but not on the east side of Summer Street, which is adjacent to the project, closer to where Pappas Street or Pappas Drive would be. So thinking is we would find parking options there. We would give options to the workers. We'd also, speak to them and see if it's potential for them to take, public transportation as well. But so it's going to be a little bit of a couple options there with parking, which we're working through right now with our real estate to find the best options. How will we relay that to the workers? Well, the workers are working for either Suffolk or Northstar, and so we will relay what we have there for potentials through all the workers through the communication of Northstar or Suffolk, and we'll let them know what the options are there. So we will be in communication with them as we ramp up the project.
Thank you. Melissa, on the topic of Chicago, there's a question about how is this situation different, and a general concern that there not be an accident in South Boston. And so I'm hoping you can just address how our process here is very different than what happened in Chicago.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to address that. First of all, I would say that we're fully aligned. No one wants to see an accident. The first way in which this project is different, and by different, I mean entirely different, is that we are using different methodologies, meaning different means and methods for the deconstruction work here. So there are no implosions that are planned. That was a planned and permitted controlled implosion in Chicago. So it was allowed, it was authorized. It did not go as planned, as intended. And so that was a problem, and we don't want to ever see that again. But we are obviously right immediately adjacent to the South Boston neighborhood here. And we are not planning to do any of those kinds of techniques on the site. So that's the first way in which it's different. The second way is all of the means and methods that we've described that relate to dust mitigation, vibration monitoring, rodent monitoring, all of that. Not that those weren't also happening there, but here we're really layering on multiple layers of protection, including doing the voluntary perimeter dust monitoring that Juliana Connolly described in great detail in order to make sure that the mitigation measures that are happening on site, that are programmed and planned and permitted on site, are actually effective. So it's a very different strategy and approach here.
Thank you. David Pearson, there's a question about where the debris, the bricks, deconstruction materials will be trucked to. Will that be in-state or out of state?
Certainly, thank you. So we'll work on a daily basis with our dispatch team, and they coordinate with the site and discuss with them the number of trucks they need. And then we look out at the capacity of each of the receiving facilities. So there are legal receiving facilities in Massachusetts, and there are also legal receiving facilities in the couple of adjoining states. So we will be doing, a combination of both.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Melissa, can you please give an update on the Massport deed restriction for residential uses?
Sure. So the deed restriction is something that we are working through with Massport. We're in communication with them on that and are evaluating the requests that they have given us, and we have provided them information in response to their requests. So it has not been modified yet, but that is something that we are working collaboratively with Massport on doing that.
There's a question about how many people attended this meeting today. We can share the exact number from our tracking when we do the Q&A in writing, but the highest number that I saw was 60 individuals. The highest number at the September meeting was 140. Melissa, question for you on traffic. Obviously, there's a significant amount of traffic pressure on the neighborhood of South Boston, as all over the city. And there's someone wondering about what we're doing to help mitigate that impact and protect the residents of the neighborhood.
Yeah, understood. So when the project gets delivered, and in fact, with the first phase of the vertical project, and when we say vertical, we mean building the new buildings. So with the first phase of that, we've committed to delivering a number of traffic improvements along Summer Street, which include actually bringing the fiber optic and data communications across so that we have what are called smart signals down into the South Boston neighborhood. Right now that exists on Summer Street in the Seaport area, but it does not extend across. So we'll be bringing it all the way from Dry Dock. So on the far side of the reserved channel, we'll pick it up there, bring it across the bridge, down into Summer Street, all the way down to East Broadway. So that's one main thing that will help. And when we did our traffic studies as it relates to the full build out of the project, implementing that as a mitigation was very helpful in terms of alleviating traffic. We've also committed to a significant subsidy for the MBTA in order to improve service to the South Boston neighborhood with different transit services that are available. The total kind of rough dollar value is $10 million, but there's what we financial folks like to call it an escalator in there too. So we pay it out over a period of 15 years with an escalator tied to the consumer price index, so that the value of it ticks up a little bit every year, so that the MBTA is continuing to receive the full value of what we committed to. So that will be used to help improve the transit services to this part of South Boston. So that should also help with traffic mitigation. There will also be, just from a public realm and pedestrian experience, there'll be significant improvements done all down East First Street, from Summer Street down to the far side of the park on both sides of the street. So the widening of those sidewalks, which I know are very difficult to traverse these days. They're not very wide or very in very good condition. So that will be improved, as well as adding in bike lanes on First Street and improving bike lane along Summer Street to encourage alternative modes of transportation. So all of that packaged together should help mitigate the traffic issues that we're experiencing today.
Thank you. Melissa, this I think is probably to you too. Once the worker parking lots are identified, is that something that we can share with the public in a weekly update perhaps, or on our website?
Sure. I don't know that they'll be changing weekly, but we could certainly, once everything is identified where folks will be parking, we could certainly post something like that on our website. And then if it were to change, we could update it on the website as well.
Great, thank you. Another question about hiring, and this may be Melissa or it may be Suffolk, I'm not sure, so please correct me, but is there a South Boston preference in our hiring for the jobs on site? And is there going to be some sort of tracking so that we can let folks know how many South Boston residents are employed on our project?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I don't know if hopefully Dara is still on, and we might be able to answer this together, because Dara, you could probably speak more specifically to who's enrolling in into the job fairs, right? And how we're tracking that.
Yes, I certainly can. So while we did take this approach to really expand our outreach, we were very specific on targeting residents and students within South Boston. So working with InkHouse, our team has sent out flyers. Flyers will actually be posted within the South Boston local paper, South Boston Today, South Boston Online, as well as an ad within Caught in Southie. So we have a number of streams right in your community and in our backyard to make sure that we're targeting residents within South Boston. In addition to that, we are going to make sure that, it totally makes sense, and I appreciate the comment, because there should be some preference to residents. And I think it's definitely our intention. Building Pathway, who is very much going to be a really key partner in how we really create that pathway and that pipeline, not just for jobs, but before they get to the job, right? How do they get on track to become qualified? By going through that pre-apprenticeship and gaining the necessary qualifications, so then they're able to then land a job. So we're really approaching this by creating, again, that clear pathway to create those trajectories to then land them into jobs. As it relates to the tracking portion, there's definitely going to be tracking. We do have a robust data system that we use on our side within our compliance team at Suffolk, where we're able to track all the demographics of our workforce on all the trades on site. So not only are we tracking the demographics of gender, race, age, we're able to get as granular as tracking the zip codes, the number of new hires, the number of those hires that are apprenticeship level. So all those things we will be able to actually have, and we do usually share this report it's public. So we share these reports with reporting authorities monthly, in some cases if it's weekly, but it's definitely information that is going to be available to the public. And hopefully that answers all the questions.
Yes, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
We have, I think, one last comment about sidewalk improvements. This isn't really related to deconstruction, but maybe Melissa wants to take just one moment to talk about the sidewalk improvements that are planned for East First Street as part of our project.
Yeah, we don't have the plans here with us tonight, because we're focusing on deconstruction, obviously. But during the entitlement process that we went through when we were permitting the master plan of the project, we committed to making improvements along the sidewalk of East First Street, both on our side of the street, so on the north side of the street where our site is, and then also on the south side of East First Street, from Summer Street down to the far side of the park down there. So those will be wider sidewalks. I don't have the dimensions at the tip of my tongue right now, but we were happy to revisit that with folks, and we can bring plans on that as we move forward with the plans for the vertical development, and show you those will be redesigned to more appropriately address current City of Boston standards.
Thank you. We have a question about sharing our South Boston resident employment data with our elected officials, and I think that's an easy yes. I'm sure we would be happy to.
Yes.
And we had a question or a comment earlier about this session being conflicting with the Red Sox game. So with that, I think it's 7:56. Our game starts at 8:08. I know everybody, including me, is very anxious to tune into that. So I think this probably concludes our session for this evening. We want to thank everyone who participated. All the questions will be tracked verbatim in a Q&A document and posted to our website. So if you didn't hear your question as you asked it tonight, please do look at our website. That was mentioned a few times this evening to see exactly what the answer is in writing. But we thank you all for participating. We very much look forward to getting to work in South Boston, and we thank you all. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.